our cultural demographic and our cultural makeup. And I'll use the Azores route as the first example. So if you look at the cultural dynamic of Bermuda, you can start to pick out where the routes will be going in the future.
Reduced flights have typically equated to higher minimum revenue guarantee payments to Skyport on part of the government. However, Minister Scott says that because travel trends are rebounding faster than projected, the minimum revenue guarantee could come to an end before 2024. And that's your afternoon newscast. I'm Gray Miners with Bermuda Broadcasting News.
And the weather brought to you by BF&M.
Be prepared this hurricane season with BF&M. Did you know that following renovations, you should review your home insurance policy to ensure you have adequate coverage, as the cost to rebuild your home may have increased. You can count on BF&M 24/7 during hurricane season and all year round. Check your policy for details.
This weather update is provided by the Bermuda Weather Service, sponsored by BF&M.
All right, thank you. Gray weather-wise for tonight. Winds out of the east to southeast, going to be partly cloudy skies. Tonight's low 74 degrees. Friday, thickening clouds later on for the day. A chance of a shower developing for Friday as well. 81 degrees, a low near 75. For the weekend on Saturday, rather cloudy with a few showers likely and a chance of thunder. So I would say some rain on Saturday. A high 79, a low 73. Sunday, sunny periods with a couple of showers around the local area. High 80, a low at 73. And next week, Monday, mostly sunny skies. No rain expected for Monday. Monday looks pretty clear, 79 with a low of 73 degrees. Relative humidity, nice. That's why it's so chilly by 63%.
This weather update was provided by the Bermuda Weather Service, sponsored by BF&M.
And as always, we're thanking the folks at BF&M and the Bermuda Weather Service.
94.9 Bermuda. Hour 95.
And it is now time for motion to adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
Yeah, welcome to Motion to Adjourn. And I'm a JP in there.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put a little.
Oh, yeah. Well, we got to change the script. Is it JP? Is it?
MP Chris Famous, Darren Roberts, JP. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that sounds like Bourne, James Bourne.
James Bourne.
Dwayne Robinson, JB.
JB, James Brown.
Hey.
And the All Stars.
Good afternoon, brother Dawn. Good afternoon, brother Dwayne.
Yes.
And good afternoon, most of all, to the people of Bermuda.
Yes, sir.
Today we have a very fully loaded show. We have two guests. One will be calling in and one we will be calling. Mm-hmm. And before we go to our guests, we just want to give some condolences to some families that have recently lost some family members. And I'm going to start off with Mr. Philip Carlton Smith of Devil's Hill. He has been a contractor, proprietor, and Sandpiper Hotel up in South Shore behind Brenda's Pool. Mr. Derek Dillis of Hermitage Road and Loyal Hill. Mr. Chalky Zool of White Hill, not Somerset.
Is a difference.
White Hill. Mr. Mango Mills, former Belco worker. Randolph Mango Mills. The first name wasn't Mango, it was Randolph Mills, but we called him Mango.
We got you.
And of, what would you call that, Quality Street? What was it, Quality Street?
Southside Quality Street. And way before that, 110th Street. We can go way back to the early 70s in that area of Horseshoe Road.
For those that don't know, that's Rangers.
Yes.
That's right.
Well, say his name.
Stephen
some respect
Landy.
on his name.
Mr. Stephen Landy.
Stephen Landy.
A.K.A. Kibbles.
Kibbles was a top DJ for OGS
Genesis. Yes. Selector.
Original gangster song.
Woo.
So, in life has a cycle, right? You begin,
That's right.
middle, and we want to, one of the things we want to incorporate in our show is to at least give a little bit of respect to, or a lot bit of respect to those who have passed in our community. So how you doing, brother Dwayne?
I'm good, and I, obviously associate myself with, the condolences, and it's been a good week. I think. I mean, we've had rain, thunder, and everything like that, but it's been decent.
Yeah. What was one day it was rain like hard, like past cats and dogs.
Yeah.
Monday, was that Monday?
I think so.
Yeah, Monday it rained hard, like it was like setting in for the day type of rain.
Yeah, we need that.
Yes.
I do.
So, we have some interesting times coming up in politics this week, bruh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later on, 'cause, no sense skirting around the obvious.
No, you can't skirt around because this is all everyone's talking about right now. For now.
Right? For now.
Like,
So, yeah. So our first guest is going to be the Honorable John Barrett. We're going to be talking about political reform.
Yeah.
Because part of politics of anything is about evolving from the days that no one got to vote except kings and queens
Yep.
to
man.
then rich people got to vote, and then women couldn't vote, black people couldn't vote, or if you could be black and vote, but you had to have earned piece of land,
Yeah.
or you could be black and vote, but you had to be a certain age. And then, so all of that is part of reform. So welcome to the air, our first guest, Honorable John Barrett, JP.
There you go. There you go.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
I shouldn't
Good
say
afternoon.
welcome back.
Yes.
Welcome back, yes.
Back.
Dwayne, yeah. Not my first time.
Yes, well, it's not your first time, but what we're understanding is you're the first one who had a political talk show.
Is that right or no?
It may be. It may be. I'm not quite sure of that. I was
Modesty.
just saying that I know Shirley Dill, I think, had some form of talk show before me, although I don't think it was exclusively politics. Not that, and the show we had was Your Turn. It was the brainchild of Alex Scott. You may know him, a former premier.
What?
Yeah.
You're saying it was a
And
PLP
when
and a
he was at Scott
UBP?
Crafts, and he asked me to host the show, and he came up with the name Your Turn, which was really quite clever, because when we'd answer calls, we'd say, "It's your turn, and you're on the air."
So you and Mr. Scott were on the air together?
No. Alex was the producer.
So what like the continuation of Your Turn? Your Turn, motion to adjourn. You hear how that goes?
That doesn't actually rhyme, but the concept of PLP and the other party working together
Yes.
to
No. Hang on there. Now, let's not rewrite history. I was editor of the Bermuda Sun newspaper, and I was not involved in politics, and I was trying my hardest to be,
neutral.
a newspaper man and totally impartial.
Oh, okay.
And Alex, who was at that time, I think, he was the he was in advertising, Scott Crafts, and he was doing a lot of the advertising work of the Progressive Labor Party, and may have been a member of the PLP at that time. But
Let's go check the members list.
the interest at that time was getting a talk show off the ground on Friday nights that would deal with topical issues, mostly politics, but not always politics. So I remember one particular show that generated a lot of calls where people wanted to talk about Phil Donahue and what he was doing on television with his talk shows. And we managed to get one of his producers, I don't think it was Phil Donahue himself, on the phone to explain what they were doing and the concept and where they were heading, and it generated quite a few calls. And then the best show that I remember is one on Christmas Eve, where we usually started at 8 and ended at 10. I think we went almost to midnight. And the great thing about that show was that people were calling in and singing Christmas carols. And there were some great singers who called in, I have to tell you. Anyways, that's,
Okay. With that said,
that's yesterday.
as you're the first caller for the show, It's your turn.
Oh,
And I'm on the air.
And you are on the air.
Yeah, I suppose a good place to start, I think one of you said it already, these are interesting times. And no doubt when people look back, it'll be a moment in Bermuda's history with the election contest in the Progressive Labor Party, the government party.
No.
But let me just say this. I want to start with that because I think when we discuss these things, I think it's a good thing to back up and look at history and what in fact we have here in Bermuda. And that would mean that you turn to the Bermuda Constitution Order of 1968, which followed a major constitutional conference which included the United Bermuda Party, the Progressive Labor Party, representation for independents who were then in the legislature, as well as the British government, the Foreign Office. And what they came up with was what was considered in its time a progressive constitution. And what it sets out is how a premier is chosen. And the wording is, and I think it's important to look at that, that's the touchstone. The premier will be the person whom the governor, acting in his discretion, believes to have is best able to command the confidence of a majority of members of that house. It's the governor who, acting in his or her discretion, makes that decision. Now, back in 1968, Bermuda moved from representative government to responsible government. And that, in short, means from a system of independent members of parliament to members of parliament who would be members of political parties. So it was the dawn of, actually political parties started before that. The Progressive Labor Party started in 63. But it was the dawn of government by political parties. And that meant that political parties had to decide how their leader would be chosen. The United Bermuda Party, up until the end, decided that it would be the leader would be the person who got the most votes of members of parliament. That was it. That very narrow group would decide.
Could you say that again clearly for those who may have missed that?
What I said was the United Bermuda Party, which formed the government from 1968 through to 1993, decided that its election of a leader would mirror the Bermuda Constitution Order, and the leader would be chosen by the members of parliament for the United Bermuda Party, and the leader would be the one that got the majority of votes. The Progressive Labor Party decided otherwise, and as we know today, they decided that their leader would be elected by representatives of the various branches. They're called delegates today, as they're known. And that tended to be a wider group than that which the United Bermuda Party had. And so in its day, the Progressive Labor Party constitution was far more progressive in the sense that it widened the circle of people who would decide who would be the leader. The challenge with that was that you had to always hope that members would adhere to their constitution, and that even though the leader may be a person selected, it would come from the members of parliament, but even though that leader might be selected by a majority of delegates, but not meet with the favor of a majority of MPs, those MPs would accept the result, and they'll move forward on that basis.
Well, Mr. Barrett, I just want to clarify real fast. Don't want my colleague to get too excited in the corner here. The One Bermuda Alliance allows its membership to. No, I'm just saying, because I know sometimes people, they conflicted too. So I'm just saying, we allow membership to decide leadership.
I think if
MPs.
anyone knows how OBA members.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead on me.
Yeah,
there.
I
can
be
get
sure.
that in a minute. It's important, I think, to look at history, because history can help us better understand why we are where we are. Although I'll grant you that life has to also be lived forward, and that's true for politics too. Now, I make that the point the way the leader was chosen because it's important to know that because at various junctures, and I know this was certainly true when Dame Jennifer Smith stepped down, I think a majority of MPs said, I wasn't there, I wasn't a member of the Progressive Labor Party, but it's my understanding, they indicated to Premier Smith at the time, Dame Jennifer, that she did not have the support of a majority of MPs. And I presume the threat was that if you stayed on, that those MPs would join with the opposition MPs in a no confidence motion, which would potentially cost her leadership and the Progressive Labor Party the government. And as we all know, Dame Jennifer Smith resigned, and when she resigned, a compromise was reached and Alex Scott was made premier. And that shows you sometimes the tension that can exist between delegates and members of parliament. It's important to note that. And then we come on to, Dwayne, you wanted to bring it up, the One Bermuda Alliance. When it was formed, and I was there then, it was decided that that vote would be open to all those the two candidates were Bob Richards and Craig Cannonier, that vote would be open to all members of the One Bermuda Alliance at that time to decide between Bob Richards and Craig Cannonier. Craig Cannonier was not an MP at the time, so it was also decided ahead of time that if anyone was elected who was not a member of Parliament, someone would step down, i.e., as it turned out, yours truly, and I had agreed to that ahead of time, would step down so that person could go into the House of Assembly. And that's something that wasn't unique to Bermuda at the time. It's done in other jurisdictions. So in that sense, the One Bermuda Alliance absolutely, totally broadened the way in which a leader was selected. Now, that person wouldn't necessarily become premier, but would become the leader of the opposition. But I would just caution this, Dwayne, I recall when Craig Cannonier resigned and Michael Dunkley became premier, my recollection is that there was no wide vote on that.
Sorry, say that again, sir.
When Craig Cannonier resigned and Michael Dunkley was made premier, I don't recall there being a wide vote on that. It may have been something, his ascension to the premiership may have been ratified by the members of their party caucus, but I don't think the wider membership had a say in that. So that in itself was a very narrow selection. But obviously all that matters to the governor under our constitutional order is that person appears to command the confidence of a majority of that party's members, and those party members being a majority in the legislature. Now, it could well be that people have an issue with the constitutional order and the way it's drafted, and it's time for change. I wouldn't disagree with that. That constitutional order is now, over 50-some years old. There have been amendments over time with the introduction of an ombudsman, the introduction of single-seat constituencies, to which the Foreign Office and Her Majesty's government agreed. Sorry, I beg your pardon. His Majesty's government agreed to. And so there can be changes done, but it requires obviously some political will on the part of the two political parties to start making these changes. And obviously people are out there making noise that they're unhappy with the way things are, and could we look at changing it? I think that's a good position to have after 50 years, to look and revisit how things are done and whether they can be done better. The same argument, gentlemen, went on in the United Kingdom with the recent election of Elizabeth Truss as the new Prime Minister of the UK. There was some to and fro going on. Well, is it more democratic, or is it a good thing to have a membership of a party, whoever signs up as a member, decide who should be the premier, and not the members of Parliament themselves? Because you have to remember, under our system, a leader is chosen by a party going into an election, and it is understood that leader would become the premier. And so when you change a premier after being in office and before your term is completed, arguably, and this happens a lot, that person should be going back to the electorate to get a mandate in his or her right. And that's a bit of an oddity, because really the leader, the premier, is meant to be the first amongst equals. First amongst equals. Not like a president of the United States or the president of a republic who is elected in his or her own right. And so it's a bit of a conundrum, but one that we have as part of our constitutional order and the Westminster system. And, there are criticisms and complaints about the Westminster system. I've made them myself, and I'll repeat myself. I'm not averse to looking at how things might be changed to better improve the way in which we function democratically.
Thank you for that, Mr. Barrett. And I think it's a piece you mentioned that I've heard a few people missing about the leadership contest. And it's that, that second part to after the delegates vote in the party leader, they still have to be confirmed by the majority of the MPs. So I think
by
that
the
second
majority
part,
of MPs in the party.
Yeah.
Well, except in the PLP, I think
technically,
when one signs up, and
in the House of Assembly,
Chris can correct us on this, the MPs accept that that's the way it is and the way it will be, and they go along with the choice of the delegates.
All right, so here's how it goes, Dwayne.
I just wanted to give the knowledge.
The MPs are a voting bloc when it comes to the leader. So it incorporates what the UBP used to do, plus broaden the franchise to allow party delegates to do that. All right?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, hypothetically, let's use a very hypothetical number.
Right.
Let's say there was 100 people voting. 70 were delegates and 30 were MPs.
Mm.
If the vote result is, 80 to 20, then clearly in that it shows that the majority of MPs voted for whomever, right? So if the majority of MPs voted for the party leader, then that's the same majority that's going to be supporting them in Parliament, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's no need for this, well, maybe we need to ask the governor who really commands the majority of the MP.
Right.
No,
it's all done in one.
Yeah, the governor accepts the choice of the party, I think. And some governors will, in some circumstances, ask for signatures. I don't know whether that's done or would be done. But that's the easy way to do it. If you have the signatures of all the members of that party, it's straightforward.
So the conversation is about reform in an ideal world, not 2022, but in an ideal setting. What does one look at? What does one see reform at that on either side of the aisle that makes it more democratic?
Well, I think one looks at both the constituencies, which I think over the years we've now got roughly, and there's a boundaries commission that meets pretty regularly to determine that they're all of an equal size, and so that is one man or one person, one vote of equal value. I think that I don't know whether we need to look at that, but certainly we could look at the Voting Act to see whether that could be improved to make things easier. And people have talked in the past about absentee balloting in an election and whether the time has come for that when people are unavoidably away but are resident here and unable to vote because they're not here on election day or the days that are provided for pre-polling. That's one thing that can be looked at. I think the other is to stand back and look at the entire system and say, all right, we've got a House of Assembly of 36 members. Do we really need 36 members? Could we reduce that down to a smaller number? And would it make us any less democratic if we did? And then if we did that, let's look at the Senate. The Senate is an unelected body which is meant to serve as a kind of check and balance on the lower house. It's the upper house in our government, our system of government, and say, well, is it right that unelected members can frustrate the will of the elected government? And they have done on different occasions where they've turned back legislation only for a year. only for a year. And not being able to frustrate the will of the Democratic government is why they're not allowed to vote on or turn back financial bills, because government relies on the passage of budgets and financial bills to run the country. But here's the thing. Is there a chance do we still want a Senate? And do we want a Senate maybe that's elected, and maybe elected by proportional representation, maybe on staggered terms rather than just one and independent or maybe at the same time as a general election, but independent of, I would have thought, better, and allow for a true check and balance. Where and in a lot of countries where you have a bicameral, as they're called, legislature, you often find, as people do in Canada, between provinces and federal, they'll vote one way federally, that is for representation in Ottawa, and another way in a province, to set up a kind of tension or check and balance, if you will, between the national government. And that causes challenges, but over the years it's worked out pretty well, and people find it to be reasonably democratic. And so you could look at the Senate and decide, well, as I say, some of those questions and whether it's time to look at them. Another one that, is so overdue for change, and that's parliamentary reform and the use of committees in the House of Assembly, particularly, and I'm going to zero in on the Public Accounts Committee. That's something that the Auditor General and audits are in the news recently. And I happened to tune in on Friday evening, and I heard Colonel Birch. And I have to tell you, I told him I thought he was spot on when he said at the end of the day, what we need to be working on are workable solutions.
Mr. Barrett, we just got to head to a break, but I want you to keep that thought and finish it right after this commercial break.
All right.
You're locked to Power 95, Bermuda's big station, at 94.9 FM, a Bermuda Broadcasting Company station.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gray Miners with Bermuda Broadcasting News with your top stories to the hour, brought to you by Butterfield.
Take control of your Butterfield credit card by downloading the Butterfield Card Alerts app. Monitor your spending activity with real-time transaction alerts sent directly to your mobile device. And if your card is lost or stolen, use the app to turn the card off, preventing any further transactions from being processed. Download the app from the Apple Store or Google Play Store today. Customized credit card controls. This is banking by Butterfield. The Bank of N.T. Butterfield & Son Limited is licensed to conduct banking business by the Bermuda Monetary Authority.
Bermudians dreaming of owning their first home are being offered a step up onto the property ladder. A joint venture between government and the Bermuda Commercial Bank will see government partially guarantee mortgages for first-time buyers, and in exchange, BCB will offer a reduced rate. We will have more on the new scheme in our TV news at 7 p.m. There were 60 new positive cases recorded by the Ministry of Health for COVID-19 out of 2,511 test results. 42 of the new cases are classified as imported, 8 cases were classified as local transmission, and 10 are under investigation. Additionally, there were 69 recoveries and 2 are in hospital. Health Minister Kim Wilson said updates will be issued every other week and will end when the emergency regulations cease November 30th. The Supreme Court trial for former Cabinet Minister Zane De Silva, Zara Harper, and Angela Caldwell of the MEF Restaurant Group continued today. This afternoon, Justice Sade Subair-Williams ruled one of the defendants had no case to answer.
Now back to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
And welcome back to Motion to Adjourn. Mr. Barrett, you can finish your point, and then I have a question for you.
All right. My 20 minutes is almost up. I was just saying, with respect to the Auditor General, it's well overdue. Colonel Birch mentioned this point for us to be developing workable solutions to get on top of what is a tremendous backlog and something that's not serving as well. And that's got to be the Public Accounts Committee, and some hard decisions have to be taken, but they need to be taken jointly by the opposition and the government party. And because, it makes for great politics, I guess, one side flogging the other. When one's in opposition and one's in government, it's your fault for the reason why things aren't up to date. Let's get them up to date and do what's necessary. And if we can't get them up to date, admit it and take it on the chin and then move forward. Because people, the way in which money is spent today focuses really on that, understandably, given the situation we're in, in Bermuda and globally as well. And it can be done, and you don't require a constitutional conference for that either. It's just a commitment that needs to be made by the two political parties. And maybe afterwards some changes can be made to the Audit Act, which is from 1990, so that's over 30 years ago. And our Constitution, as I say, which is over 50 years ago. And I'll leave it at that.
I think that's what the British Virgin Islands are doing, right? They've come together.
There is something. There's a long letter to the editor today in the newspaper, and it makes some good points along the way, and comes to the conclusion that I've just shared in terms of what I think needs to be done, and it touches upon what's happening in the BVI. Yes.
Yeah, the opposition and ruling house have come together to get the audits up to snuff the accounts.
But it's a system problem, it's just some of the governments have. I mean, I remember arguments going back and forth when I was a reporter and reporting on the House Assembly, and that goes back, I have to tell you, to the 1970s.
Yep.
Where people have been complaining of backbenchers and opposition and others about the way in which audits are being conducted and the way in which financial statements are being produced.
But
we've got to get a grip.
Well, Mr. Barrett, how do you feel about a system where the premier runs a separate election? Maybe if you have a ruling party that is elected and then they put forward like 2 or 3 candidates as premier and just let the wider community vote for them.
Well, I suppose that's one way of doing it. I just think you'll have to modify the Westminster system and have some checks and balances in there, because when it's done in a republic, the president can then choose his own cabinet, and you're moving away from a Westminster system where you have the MPs deciding. I mean, one of the arguments, believe it or not, in Britain was with respect to allowing anybody other than the MPs deciding who their leader will be, is would, for instance, would the BBC allow its shareholders and directors to decide who the chief executive officer should be to run the BBC? And of course, that's not done in BBC or any other businesses for that matter. But governments are not businesses, and whatever business we want to be in, I think we want to be in the business of democracy.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions to me?
You're very welcome.
Well, for me, it's definitely something that I think, because I know that certain constitutional changes we have to go and basically move away from Westminster. And do you think that there will come a time where our changes do come to that sort of red line, and maybe might be time to consider whether Westminster work?
And you should always be open to considering everything. I mean, I love this expression: argue like you're right, but listen like you're wrong. And I would be open to hearing things like that. But I've always believed that there's so much more we can do to modify the Westminster system if only we had the political will, and people had the opportunity, and it became sort of standing operating procedure that after an election is over and one party's been elected government and the other's been elected opposition, they still are required to work together in committee systems, particularly the Public Accounts Committee, to get on with the job of helping to run the country and to help the government perform better. And I'm afraid that has not been our history. The political narrative, I think, has been immature to this point. And I'm not pointing fingers. I think there's enough blame to go around if you go back and look from 1968 up until today. But what blame doesn't progress at all.
One final closing thing. Speaking of Westminster system, thoughts of Liz Truss?
Sorry, I missed that.
I said, speaking of jolly old Westminster system, your thoughts of the election and first month performance of Prime Minister Liz Truss.
I think, Chris, in the courtroom, we call that a leading question. I think her record speaks for herself. I mean, the about face that she had to do, and pretty quickly, does not augur well for her or for the Conservative Party. And I'm sure Boris Johnson, if he isn't just rubbing his hands on the backbench, he's salivating at this turn of events. And so we'll see where we go from there. Meanwhile, the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keith, what's it, Stammer is his last name?
Keir Starmer.
Yeah, there you
Apparently, he gave for him a dynamic speech at the Labour conference where he set out the platform that the Labour Party would do, which was a big departure from previous conferences, which actually tended to capture the imagination of the country. So we'll see what's going to happen there.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you once again for your latest lesson, and we endeavor to get back on track and have you on your turn once a month.
Okay, I hope you caught that little comment I made about argue like you're right, but listen like you're wrong.
Wow, I wrote the first part, Don.
No, but I think there's a lot to be said for that. You know, I used to, when I judged debates, I used to tell people, you know, you do really well not only when you argue your case, but when you listen to what the other side is saying and you go back and you accept the points and disagree that you agree with, and you disagree with the points that you disagree with. It shows you're listening. And, you know, people deserve that kind of respect as well, wherever they are, whoever they are.
Agreed.
So, speaking about debates, we'll talk on that one another day.
All right.
What do you think of the fact that there are debates between PLP candidates for leadership and deputy leadership?
I think that's right and proper. Isn't that what you want to see? So that it isn't just on personalities and what deals, or I shouldn't say deals, that's a pejorative word, whatever is going on behind the scenes to persuade people how to vote. I think it's good to have an open debate, and I think the day will come, and will have to come, where they'll be open to the general, to anyone who's interested, and not just party members. I think that's the direction in which things are going.
Okay.